The massive space station Harmony Point floated in the void between two star systems, like a metal flower blooming in the darkness. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports, bringing together species that had never dreamed of meeting just a century ago. Today, it would host one of the most important diplomatic meetings in galactic history. Empress Zarathil stood at the viewing port of her flagship, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Her crystalline skin caught the light from nearby stars, casting rainbow patterns across the bridge of her vessel. She was tall even by Kathmori standards, nearly 8 feet in height, with 4 arms that moved with precise, calculated grace. Her people had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and she carried that weight of authority in every gesture. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in perfect silence. The Kathmori did not waste time on unnecessary conversation. Every movement had purpose, every word carried meaning. It was the way of their people, the way that had made them strong enough to carve out an empire among the stars. They valued order, hierarchy, and perfection above all else. "Your Majesty," came a voice from behind her. Zarathil turned to see Commander Nethral, her most trusted military advisor. His own crystalline features were set in the neutral expression that all Kathmori maintained in public. "The docking procedures are complete. The diplomatic shuttle is ready for departure." Zarathil nodded once. She had not wanted to come to this meeting. The humans were a young species, barely 3 centuries since they had developed space travel. Their expansion into Kathmori territory had been rapid and concerning. They built colonies where they pleased, formed alliances with smaller species, and seemed to ignore the established order that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia, but war with humanity would be costly. The humans had proven themselves surprisingly capable in battle, and their technology advanced at an alarming rate. More troubling still were the reports of their social structures. They seemed to value individual worth over proper hierarchy, emotion over logic, and inclusion over order. It was chaos disguised as civilization. "Commander," Zarathil said, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of royal bloodline, "ensure that all protocols are followed precisely. We cannot afford to appear weak before these humans. Of course, Your Majesty, however, there is one matter." Nethral hesitated, which was unusual for him. "Your daughter, Princess Villana? The court advisors believe it would be more appropriate if she remained aboard the flagship." Zarathil's 4 hands clenched slightly. This was the eternal problem, the source of shame that followed her everywhere. Villana had been born with a condition that affected her nervous system. She could not walk without assistance, her speech was sometimes slow, and her movements were not the fluid grace expected of Kathmori nobility. In their society, physical perfection was seen as a reflection of inner worth. A disabled princess was an embarrassment to the royal line. "My daughter comes with me," Zarathil said firmly. "My usual advisors are dealing with the rebellion in the outer systems. I will not leave her alone on the ship. Your Majesty, the humans may see her condition as a sign of weakness in our bloodline. It could affect the negotiations." Zarathil's eyes flashed with anger. "My daughter is a princess of the Kathmori Empire. She will be treated with the respect due to her position. Anyone who questions this will answer to me personally." Nethral bowed deeply. "Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect." The shuttle bay was a marvel of Kathmori engineering. Everything was smooth curves and flowing lines, designed to inspire awe in those who saw it. The diplomatic shuttle itself was a work of art, its hull polished to mirror brightness. Inside, the seats were arranged according to strict hierarchy, with Zarathil at the front, her advisors behind her, and servants in the rear. Princess Villana sat in a specially designed chair that provided support for her condition. She was smaller than her mother, more delicate, but she shared the same crystalline skin and 4 arms. Her eyes were larger than typical for their species, and they held an intelligence that many overlooked because of her physical limitations. She wore the finest robes, but they could not hide the mobility device that helped her move. As the shuttle approached Harmony Point, Zarathil studied the reports on human customs. Their greeting rituals seemed excessive, involving physical contact and emotional displays that the Kethmori found disturbing. They smiled constantly, which in Kethmori culture was seen as a sign of weakness or deception. Most confusing of all, they seemed to treat their disabled and elderly with the same respect as their leaders. The docking went smoothly. The human delegation was waiting for them in the station's main diplomatic hall. Zarathul recognized Ambassador Patricia Liu from her photographs. The human woman was shorter than any Kethmori, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore simple clothing by Kethmori standards, but her posture suggested confidence and authority. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Liu said, bowing in what Zarathul recognized as an attempt at Kethmori greeting customs. "Welcome to Harmony Point. We are honored by your presence." Zarathul inclined her head slightly. "Ambassador Liu, I trust the accommodations are suitable for these discussions." "Absolutely. We have prepared meeting rooms with atmospheric controls for both our species. But first, if you would like to dine, we have arranged for a meal at one of the station's finest restaurants. We thought you might enjoy experiencing human cuisine." The idea of eating in a public restaurant was strange to Zarathul. Kethmori nobility dined in private, served by carefully trained staff who understood the complex protocols involved. But this was diplomacy, and she had learned to expect unusual customs from humans. "Very well," she said. "Lead the way." As they walked through the station's corridors, Zarathul noticed how different everything was from Kethmori architecture. The walls were covered with artwork from dozens of different species. Children from various worlds played in open areas, while their parents watched and smiled. Most disturbing of all, she saw several humans with visible disabilities moving freely through the crowds, treated no differently than anyone else. One human man passed them in a wheeled chair, his legs clearly not functional. Yet he wore what appeared to be a uniform and carried himself with dignity. A human woman with a white cane navigated the corridors with practiced ease, and others moved aside to help her without making a spectacle of it. It was chaos, but it was also something else that Zarathul could not quite name. Behind her, Princess Velana watched everything with wide eyes. She had never been in such a place before, surrounded by so many different beings who seemed to accept each other despite their differences. Her mobility device drew curious glances, but not the stares of pity or disgust she was used to from the Kethmori court. The restaurant was called Luna's Kitchen, and it was unlike anything Zarathul had ever seen. The dining room was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable seating. The walls were decorated with pictures of Earth, showing landscapes and cities that seemed impossibly diverse. Most shocking of all, the staff appeared to be enjoying their work, smiling and laughing as they served customers. Ambassador Liu led them to a table in a quiet corner of the restaurant. "I hope you'll find the atmosphere pleasant," she said. "Jake Martinez, our head waiter, will be taking care of you today. He's one of our best." Zarathul settled into her chair, trying to process everything she was seeing. This was not how royalty was supposed to dine. There were no protocols, no careful arrangements of seating based on rank. Humans of all ages and backgrounds sat together, talking and laughing as if they were equals. Princess Velana was placed beside her mother, her mobility device folded and stored nearby. She looked around the restaurant with wonder, taking in the sounds and smells of this strange new world. For the first time in her life, she was not the only one who was different. Here, differences seemed to be celebrated rather than hidden. As they waited for their server, Zarathul wondered what other surprises this diplomatic mission would bring. She had come here expecting to negotiate with a primitive species, to establish boundaries and maintain order. Instead, she was beginning to suspect that the humans might teach her something she had never expected to learn. The evening was about to change everything she thought she knew about civilization, about worth, and about what it truly meant to be strong. Jake Martinez had been working at Luna's Kitchen for 3 years, and in that time he had served customers from over 40 different worlds. He had learned to read the subtle signs that told him whether a guest was comfortable, nervous, or just trying to be polite about food they clearly did not enjoy. Today, however, presented a challenge unlike anything he had faced before. The Imperial Kethmori delegation had just been seated at Table 12, the quiet corner booth that Ambassador Liu always requested for important diplomatic meetings. Jake had been briefed about their customs, warned about their formal protocols, and told to be especially careful not to cause any offense. What the briefing had not prepared him for was the sight of the young princess sitting slightly apart from the group, her mobility device folded beside her chair. Jake recognized the look in her eyes immediately. It was the same expression his younger brother Carlos had worn during his first day at a new school, when other children stared at his wheelchair and whispered behind their hands. It was the look of someone who expected to be treated as less than everyone else, someone who had learned to make themselves small to avoid drawing attention. The other servers were nervous about approaching the table. Jake could see them whispering in the kitchen, drawing straws to see who would have to deal with the alien royalty. But Jake was not worried about protocol or diplomatic incidents. He was thinking about a young being who looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. He straightened his uniform, picked up his order pad, and walked over to their table with the same confident stride he used for every customer. As he approached, he could see the tension in the group. The Empress sat perfectly upright, her crystalline skin reflecting the restaurant's warm lighting. Her advisors flanked her on both sides, their expressions neutral but alert. Only the princess seemed to relax slightly as Jake approached, perhaps recognizing something in his manner that the others missed. "Good evening," Jake said, addressing the entire table but making sure to include the princess in his eye contact. "Welcome to Luna's kitchen. My name is Jake, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. I hope you're all having a pleasant visit to Harmony Point." Empress Zarethel studied him carefully. She had expected the human to focus entirely on her, to treat her with the excessive deference that most species showed to Kethmori nobility. Instead, this young man seemed to be treating them all as equals, even her daughter. It was either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. "We are here at the recommendation of Ambassador Liu," the Empress said carefully. "We understand that this establishment serves traditional human cuisine." "That's right," Jake replied with a smile. "We specialize in comfort foods from Earth, but we've adapted many of our recipes to work with different dietary needs. I have a complete breakdown of ingredients and nutritional information for all our dishes, including notes on how they might affect different species' digestive systems." He turned slightly toward Princess Valana, who had been watching the conversation with growing interest. "Is there anything specific you'd like to know about our menu? Any particular flavors or textures you prefer?" The princess looked surprised that he had addressed her directly. In the Kethmori court, servants and staff always spoke to her through her mother or her attendants. No one had ever asked her opinion about food before. She began, then stopped and looked at her mother for permission. Zarethel found herself in an unexpected position. Protocol demanded that she answer for her daughter, but the human waiter was clearly expecting Valana to speak for herself. She gave a slight nod, curious to see what would happen. "I have never tasted human food before," Valana said, her voice quiet but clear. "What would you suggest for someone who has only eaten Kethmori cuisine?" Jake's smile widened. "Well, that depends on what you enjoy. Do you prefer foods that are more savory or sweet? Do you like things that are warm and comforting, or would you rather try something with more complex flavors?" As Valana considered the question, Jake noticed how her whole demeanor had changed. She was sitting straighter, her large eyes bright with curiosity. It was clear that no one had ever asked her opinion about anything before, and she was savoring the experience of being treated as an individual with her own preferences. "I think I would like something warm and comforting," she said after a moment. "Something that would make me feel welcome." "Perfect," Jake said. "I have just the thing. We have a dish called chicken soup that's been a comfort food on Earth for centuries. It's gentle on the stomach, full of good nutrients, and it's the kind of food that makes you feel like you're being hugged from the inside. I can have our chef prepare it with ingredients that are safe for Kethmori digestion." Valana's eyes lit up. That sounds wonderful. Zarathil watched this exchange with growing amazement. Her daughter was actually engaging in conversation with a stranger, expressing preferences and making decisions. In the rigid structure of the Kethmori court, Valana had never been allowed such freedom. Her condition was seen as a limitation that required constant supervision and decision-making by others. Jake took the rest of their orders with the same easy professionalism, making recommendations based on each person's preferences and dietary needs. He never once made Valana feel like she was different or needed special treatment. Instead, he treated her mobility device the same way he might treat someone's glasses or jewelry, as simply another part of who she was when he returned. With their beverages, Jake noticed that Valana was listening intently to the soft music playing throughout the restaurant. Earth jazz mixed with ambient sounds from various worlds created a gentle, welcoming atmosphere that seemed to captivate her. "Do you like the music?" Jake asked as he set down her drink. "Yes, it's beautiful," Valana replied. "Is this typical of human music?" "This is just one type," Jake explained. "Humans have hundreds of different musical styles. This particular mix is designed to help people relax and enjoy their meal. Music is very important to human culture. We use it to celebrate, to comfort each other, to tell stories, and to bring people together." "Do humans dance to their music?" Valana asked, and Jake could hear the longing in her voice. "Oh, yes," Jake said enthusiastically. "Dancing is one of our favorite ways to express joy. There are as many different types of dancing as there are types of music. Some are formal and structured, others are completely free-form. Some you do alone, others with partners or groups." Zarathil noticed how her daughter's face had changed as Jake spoke about dancing. There was a wistfulness there that the Empress had never seen before. In Kethmori culture, dancing was a formal art performed only by trained professionals. It required perfect physical coordination and grace, qualities that Valana would never possess. "I have never danced," Valana admitted. Quietly. "I have watched others, but I cannot move the way dancers are supposed to move." Jake's expression softened. "You know, some of the most beautiful dancing I've ever seen has been done by people who move differently than others. My grandmother used to say that dancing isn't about perfect technique or following rules. It's about letting the music move through you and expressing whatever you're feeling in that moment." He paused, then continued with genuine warmth. "There are many different ways to dance. Some use their whole body, others focus on their hands or face. Some dancers sit while they move, others use assistive devices. The only requirement for dancing is that you want to feel the music." Valana stared at him in wonder. "You really believe that?" "I know it," Jake said firmly. "I've seen it with my own eyes. In fact, we sometimes have live music here in the evenings. People dance right here in the restaurant, and everyone is welcome to join in, regardless of how they move." As Jake went to check on their food, Zarathil found herself studying her daughter's face. There was something new there, something she had never seen before. Hope, perhaps, or possibility. For the first time in her life, someone had told Valana that she was capable of something beautiful, something joyful. The Empress began to wonder what other assumptions she had made about limitations and possibilities. This simple human waiter had accomplished something in 10 minutes that years of the finest Kethmori education had not. He had made her daughter believe in herself. When Jake returned with their food, he served each dish with care and attention, explaining the ingredients and preparation methods. But it was clear that his real gift was not in food service. It was in seeing people for who they could become rather than who they appeared to be. As they ate, Valana continued to ask questions about human culture, about music and dancing, and the ways that humans celebrated life. Jake answered each question with patience and enthusiasm, treating her curiosity as a gift rather than a burden. Zarathil realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary. Her daughter was not just eating dinner. She was discovering that the world was full of possibilities she had never imagined. And it was all because a human waiter had chosen to see her as a person rather than a disability. The meal was becoming something much more than diplomatic courtesy. It was becoming a revelation that would change everything the Empress thought she knew about worth, about dignity, and about what it truly meant to be alive. The dinner was winding down when Jake noticed Princess Valana's foot tapping gently under the table. The restaurant's evening playlist had shifted to something more upbeat, a fusion of earth jazz and gentle percussion that seemed to call to something deep inside her. Her large eyes were focused on the small speakers mounted around the dining room, and Jake could see the longing written across her crystalline features. He had seen that look before in his brother Carlos during their childhood. It was the expression of someone who wanted desperately to participate in something beautiful but had been told their entire life that they were not capable of it. Jake had learned long ago that capability was not about meeting other people's expectations. It was about finding your own way to express joy. Jake excused himself from the table and walked quickly to the restaurant's small office behind the kitchen. He pulled out his personal music player, a small device that his grandmother had given him years ago. It was loaded with songs from their family's collection, music that had been passed down through generations of Martinez dancers. His grandmother had always told him that music was meant to be shared, that dancing was a gift that everyone deserved to experience. When he returned to the dining room, he carried the small speaker in his hands. The Kethmori delegation looked up as he approached, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Jake could see the tension in Empress Zarathal's posture, the way her forearms had positioned themselves in a protective stance around her daughter. "Your Highness," Jake said, addressing Valana directly, "I noticed you seem to enjoy the music. I was wondering if you might like to experience what human dancing feels like." The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Kethmori believed about propriety and dignity. Zarathal's crystalline skin seemed to darken with shock. Dancing was not something that disabled individuals did in their culture. It was certainly not something that royalty did in public, especially not with a servant from another species. "That is quite impossible," Zarathal said firmly. "My daughter cannot dance. Her condition does not allow for such activities." But Jake had not taken his eyes off Valana, and he could see the spark of desperate hope that flickered there. She wanted this with an intensity that seemed to radiate from her very being. Jake had learned from his brother that the word cannot was often just another way of saying has never been allowed to try. "Your Majesty," Jake said respectfully, "I understand your concern. But dancing is not just about perfect movement or meeting certain physical requirements. It's about feeling the music and expressing that feeling in whatever way your body allows. Everyone can dance, they just dance differently." He set the speaker on a nearby table and knelt down beside Valana's chair so that he was at her eye level. His voice was gentle but full of conviction. "Princess, have you ever wanted to feel what it's like when music moves through your body? When you can express happiness not just with words but with movement?" Valana looked at her mother, then back at Jake. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I have dreamed of it. But I cannot stand without my mobility device, and I cannot move with the grace that dancers are supposed to have." "Grace is not about moving perfectly," Jake said with a warm smile. "Grace is about moving authentically. My grandmother taught me that the most beautiful dancing happens when someone stops worrying about what they're supposed to look like and starts focusing on what they feel like." He stood up and demonstrated a simple movement, swaying gently from side to side. "This is dancing. Just feeling the rhythm and letting it move you. You don't need to stand, you don't need to move your legs. Your arms, your shoulders, your head, even your eyes can dance." Zarathal watched in amazement as her daughter's expression transformed. The resignation and sadness that had always shadowed Valana's features were replaced by something the Empress had never seen before, pure undiluted hope. "Mother," Valana said, her voice stronger now, "may I try?" It was perhaps the most difficult moment of Zarathal's life. Every instinct trained into her by centuries of royal protocols screamed that this was inappropriate, dangerous, and beneath the dignity of the imperial family. But she could see something in her daughter's eyes that she had never seen before. Something that looked like the beginning of joy. "Very well," she said finally. But if you become tired or uncomfortable, we will stop immediately. Jake's face lit up with genuine excitement. He moved to position himself where he could support Valana without making her feel helpless. Okay, princess, let's start simple. Feel the music first. Don't worry about moving yet. Just listen to the rhythm. He activated the speaker, and gentle music filled their corner of the restaurant. It was a song from Earth, something soft and welcoming that seemed to wrap around them like a warm embrace. Jake began to sway very slightly, not performing but simply showing what it looked like to let music move through a person. Valana closed her eyes and listened. For the first time in her life, she was not thinking about her limitations or her dignity or what other people expected of her. She was simply feeling the music as it washed over her, feeling the way it seemed to pulse in harmony with her heartbeat. Now, Jake said softly, just let your shoulders move a little. Feel how the music wants to flow through them. Valana began to move, slowly at first, just a gentle swaying of her upper body. Jake matched her rhythm, creating a connection between them that transcended species and physical differences. He showed her how to use her arms to express the melody, how to let her head move with the beat, how to smile and let that smile become part of the dance. Other diners in the restaurant had begun to notice what was happening. Instead of staring in judgment or pity, they watched with growing appreciation. There was something beautiful about seeing someone discover joy for the first time, something that spoke to the best parts of human nature. Jake helped Valana explore different movements, always supporting her but never controlling her. He showed her how to spin gently in her chair, how to use her hands to paint pictures in the air, how to express emotions through movement that words could never capture. With each new discovery, Valana's confidence grew. I'm dancing, she whispered. And then louder, I'm actually dancing. The joy in her voice was infectious. Jake found himself grinning as he guided her through a gentle turn, her forearms moving in patterns that were uniquely her own. This was not the formal, rigid dancing of Kethmori culture. This was something entirely new, something that belonged to her alone. Zarathil watched her daughter with growing amazement. She had never seen Valana look so alive, so present in her own body. The princess was glowing with happiness, her movements fluid and natural despite her physical limitations. More importantly, she was laughing, a sound that Zarathil had rarely heard from her daughter. The music swelled, and Jake and Valana moved together in perfect harmony. They were not performing for an audience. They were simply sharing a moment of pure joy. Jake's movements were supportive and encouraging, never overwhelming or showy. He had become a partner in Valana's self-discovery, helping her find expressions of beauty that no one had ever told her she was capable of. As the song came to an end, Jake helped Valana settle back into her chair. But the transformation in her was permanent. She sat straighter, her eyes bright with newfound confidence. She had discovered something about herself that would change her forever. She was not broken. She was not limited. She was simply different, and different could be beautiful. Thank you, she said to Jake, her voice thick with emotion. That was the most wonderful thing I have ever experienced. Jake smiled and gave her a small bow. Thank you for letting me share it with you, princess. You are a natural dancer. The restaurant had fallen quiet around them, other diners having stopped their conversations to witness something extraordinary. But it was not the spectacle that had captured their attention. It was the pure, authentic joy that radiated from a young being who had just discovered that she was capable of creating beauty. Zarathil found herself struggling with emotions she had been trained to suppress. She was watching her daughter experience true happiness for the first time, and it was happening because a human waiter had refused to accept limitations that the Kethmori had always considered absolute. The dance was over, but its impact was just beginning. In those few minutes, Jake Martinez had shown Princess Valana that she was not defined by her disability, that she was capable of grace and beauty and joy. More importantly, he had shown Empress Zarathil that everything she thought she knew about worth and dignity might be wrong. As the evening continued, Velana could not stop talking about the dance, about how it felt to express herself through movement, about the discovery that her body could create beauty instead of just being a source of limitation. The change in her was so profound that even her mother's advisors began to look at her differently. Jake had given them more than just a dance. He had given them a glimpse of what the world could look like when everyone was valued for who they were rather than judged for what they could not do. It was a lesson that would echo far beyond the walls of Luna's kitchen, changing not just one life but the future of an entire empire. The music had stopped, but Empress Zarethel could still hear it echoing in her mind. She watched her daughter's face, seeing emotions there that she had never witnessed before. Velena was glowing with a happiness so pure and complete that it seemed to transform her entire being. For the first time in her life, the princess looked truly alive. Zarethel felt something wet on her crystalline cheek, and realized with shock that she was crying. In Kethmori culture, tears were a sign of weakness, something to be hidden and ashamed of. Yet she could not stop them from falling as she watched her daughter discover joy. The sight of Velana dancing, moving with grace and beauty despite what their society called limitations, had shattered something deep inside the Empress. As Jake helped Velana settle back into her chair, Zarethel found herself rising from her seat. Her advisors looked alarmed, uncertain what protocol demanded in this unprecedented situation. The Empress ignored them completely and approached the young human waiter who had just changed her world. "You," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "What do you want from us? What is your price for this kindness?" Jake looked genuinely confused by the question. "Your Majesty, I don't want anything. I was just sharing something beautiful with someone who wanted to experience it." "There must be something," Zarethel insisted. Her mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps this was an elaborate human plot to manipulate the negotiations. Perhaps Jake was a spy, trained to identify weaknesses in the Kethmori royal family. No one showed such kindness without expecting something in return. "Do you seek political favor, trade agreements, military intelligence?" Jake's expression grew even more confused than concerned. "I think there might be some misunderstanding." "Your Majesty, I'm not involved in politics or trade or anything like that. I'm just a waiter. I serve food and try to make sure everyone who comes here feels welcome." "But why would you help my daughter? Why would you show her kindness when she can offer you nothing in return?" The question seemed to sadden Jake. "Your Majesty, with respect, your daughter has already given me something precious. She shared her joy with me. She trusted me enough to try something new. That's not nothing, that's everything." Zarethel stared at him, trying to understand what he meant. In Kethmori society, value was measured in concrete terms: power, wealth, military strength, physical perfection. The idea that joy could be valuable, that trust could be a gift, was completely foreign to her. "I don't understand," she admitted. "In our culture, those with disabilities are seen as burdens. They require care and resources but can contribute nothing in return. My daughter has been hidden away because her presence brings shame to our family line." Jake's face darkened with something that looked like anger, but when he spoke, his voice remained gentle. "Your Majesty, I have a younger brother named Carlos. He was born with cerebral palsy, which affects his movement and speech. When he was little, some people looked at him the way you're describing, like he was a burden or a problem to be solved." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But Carlos is one of the smartest, funniest, most creative people I know. He sees the world differently than I do, and that different perspective has taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. He's studying to become an engineer now, designing assistive technologies that help other people with disabilities live fuller lives." Zarethel felt her worldview cracking like ice under pressure. "But surely his condition limits what he can accomplish." "It changes how he accomplishes things," Jake corrected, "but it doesn't limit what he can accomplish. Some of the greatest minds in human history have been people with disabilities. They've created art, made scientific discoveries, led movements for social change, and contributed to society in ways that changed our entire species for the better." He gestured toward Velana, who was still radiating joy from their dance. Your daughter has an incredible mind and a beautiful spirit. The only thing limiting her is a society that refuses to see her potential. But she cannot walk properly, cannot move with the grace expected of nobility. So what? Jake asked in the casual way he dismissed what the Kethmori considered a fundamental flaw left Zarathel speechless. There are thousands of ways to move through the world. Walking is just one of them. Grace isn't about meeting someone else's expectations, it's about being authentically yourself. Jake sat down across from the Empress, speaking with the passion of someone sharing a truth he held dear. On Earth, we've learned that diversity makes us stronger. When we include everyone, when we value different perspectives and abilities, we solve problems better. We create more beautiful art, we build more innovative technologies. We become more than we could ever be if we only valued one way of being human. You truly believe this? Zarathel asked. I've lived it, Jake replied. My brother Carlos has taught me more about courage and determination than anyone else I know. My grandmother, who taught me to dance, was in a wheelchair for the last 10 years of her life, but she was still the most graceful person I've ever met. One of our greatest scientists, Dr. Maria Santos, is blind, but she sees patterns in data that sighted researchers miss. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with conviction. Your daughter just showed incredible bravery by trying something new, by trusting a stranger, by refusing to let fear hold her back. Those are the qualities of a leader, not a burden. Zarathel turned to look at Villana, who was explaining the dance to her fascinated advisors. The princess was animated in a way the Empress had never seen before, using her forearms to demonstrate movements, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She was not hiding or apologizing for her differences. She was celebrating them. What you're describing, Zarathel said slowly, this acceptance of differences, this inclusion of everyone regardless of ability, how does it work in practice? How do you structure a society around such principles? Jake's face lit up. It starts with changing how we think about disability. Instead of seeing it as something wrong that needs to be fixed, we see it as natural human variation. We design our buildings, our technology, our social systems to work for everyone, not just those who meet some arbitrary standard of normal. He pulled out his communication device and showed her images from Earth. These are schools where children, with and without disabilities, learn together. These are workplaces designed to accommodate different abilities. These are sports leagues where everyone can participate regardless of their physical capabilities. The images showed a world that seemed impossible to Zarathel. Children of all abilities playing together, adults with various disabilities in positions of authority and respect, technology designed to help rather than exclude. It was chaos by Kethmori standards, but it was also something beautiful. The key, Jake continued, is understanding that the problem isn't the disability itself. The problem is a society that creates barriers instead of opportunities. When we remove those barriers, amazing things happen. Villana had wheeled her mobility device over to join their conversation. Mother, she said, her voice stronger and more confident than Zarathel had ever heard it. Is it true? Are there really places where people like me are valued for who we are instead of judged for what we cannot do? Zarathel looked at her daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. She saw the intelligence that had always been there but had been dismissed because it came in a package that their society deemed imperfect. She saw the kindness that had been hidden away because it was attached to someone considered shameful. She saw the potential that had been wasted because they had focused on limitations instead of possibilities. Yes, Zarathel said quietly. The word carrying the weight of a decision that would change everything. I believe there are such places. And perhaps it is time that we created one in our own empire. Jake smiled, the kind of smile that came from witnessing someone discover a truth that would transform their life. Your Majesty, if you decide to make changes, there are many humans who would be honored to help. We've learned a lot about building inclusive societies, and we believe that sharing knowledge makes everyone stronger. The Empress felt the last of her old beliefs crumbling away. She had come to this space station expecting to negotiate with a primitive species about territorial boundaries. Instead, she had discovered that the humans possessed something far more valuable than advanced technology or military might. They possessed wisdom about what it meant to be truly civilized. "My daughter," Zarathil said, turning to Valana, "when we return home, things are going to change. You will no longer be hidden away. You will take your rightful place as a princess of our empire, and you will help us learn what it means to value everyone." Valana's eyes filled with tears of joy. For the first time in her life, she was being seen not as a disappointment or a burden, but as someone with something valuable to contribute. The dance had been just the beginning. Now she would have the chance to help her entire species learn what she had discovered, that everyone had something beautiful to offer the world. As they prepared to return to the diplomatic meetings, Zarathil realized that the negotiations had already been transformed. She was no longer talking to the humans as a superior species dealing with primitives. She was talking to them as someone who had much to learn. 3 months had passed since that life-changing evening at Luna's kitchen, and the Kethmori Empire was experiencing a transformation unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Empress Zarathil stood in the Grand Council chamber of her palace, but the room looked nothing like it had before her. Journey to Harmony Point. The rigid seating arrangements that had once separated nobles by rank had been replaced with circular tables, where people could face each other as equals. Ramps and accessible pathways now connected every level of the chamber, and assistive devices were scattered throughout the space. Most remarkable of all, Princess Valana sat at the center table beside her mother, no longer hidden away but serving as the Empire's first Minister of Inclusion. Her mobility device had been upgraded with Kethmori technology, allowing her to move with greater independence, but more importantly, she carried herself with a confidence that radiated throughout the room. The princess who had once believed she was a burden to her family now spoke with authority about policies that would affect millions of lives. "The preliminary reports from the outer colonies are encouraging," Valana announced to the assembled council. "The new accessibility standards have been implemented in 70% of our public buildings, and we're seeing increased participation in education and employment among citizens with disabilities." Jake Martinez sat at one of the tables, wearing the formal robes of a cultural ambassador, but still maintaining the warm, approachable manner that had started this entire revolution. He had been invited to the Kethmori homeworld to help establish the new inclusion programs, bringing with him a team of human specialists in adaptive technology, inclusive education, and disability rights. "The most significant change," Jake added, "has been in how people think about disability itself. When we stop seeing differences as problems to be solved and start seeing them as natural variations to be celebrated, everything else becomes possible." Zarathil nodded as she listened to the reports. The changes had not been easy to implement. Many of the older nobles had resisted the new policies, arguing that they went against centuries of tradition. Some had even suggested that the Empress had been influenced by alien propaganda, but the results spoke for themselves. Citizens who had been hidden away for years were now contributing to society in ways no one had imagined possible. "Tell us about the research facility," Zarathil requested. Commander Nethrall, who had initially opposed the changes but had gradually become one of their strongest supporters, stood to address the council. "The new Institute for Adaptive Sciences has made remarkable progress. Dr. Velther, who was previously dismissed from service due to his visual impairment, has developed a new navigation system that works better than anything our sighted engineers had created. His different way of processing spatial information allowed him to see solutions that others missed." Jake smiled as he remembered his first meeting with Dr. Velther, the Kethmori scientist had been bitter and angry after years of being told his blindness made him useless. Now he led a team of researchers from multiple species working on technologies that would help beings with various disabilities across the galaxy. "The education reforms are showing even more promising results," Valana continued. "Schools that have implemented inclusive classrooms are reporting higher achievement levels for all students, not just those with disabilities." When children learn alongside peers with different abilities, they develop greater creativity, empathy, and problem-solving skills. This had been one of the most controversial changes. Traditional Kethmori education separated students based on ability, with those deemed imperfect relegated to special institutions. The new system brought everyone together, adapting teaching methods to accommodate different learning styles and abilities. Teachers had been trained to see diversity as a strength rather than a challenge to be managed. "What about the military integration program?" asked General Kethver, who had initially been the most vocal opponent of including disabled individuals in the armed forces. Jake looked to Captain Lisa Chun, one of the human advisors who specialized in adaptive military training. "The results have exceeded all expectations," she reported. Kethmori citizens with various disabilities have brought unique skills to different military roles. Those with enhanced hearing serve as exceptional communications specialists. Individuals with mobility differences have proven brilliant at strategic planning and systems analysis. We've learned that physical requirements were often arbitrary barriers that prevented us from utilizing valuable talents. General Kethver nodded grudgingly. He had witnessed firsthand how a soldier with a prosthetic arm had outperformed his peers in technical maintenance, and how a communications officer with autism had detected patterns in enemy transmissions that others had missed. The general's own nephew, born with a developmental disability, was now serving with distinction in the intelligence division. "The economic impact has been substantial as well," added Minister Tordal, the Empire's chief economist. "Bringing previously excluded citizens into the workforce has increased our productivity by 18%. More importantly, the innovations developed for accessibility have created entirely new industries and export opportunities." Zarathul had been amazed to discover how much untapped potential had existed in their empire. Citizens who had been hidden away in institutions were now working as artists, scientists, teachers, and leaders. The technologies developed to assist them had applications that benefited everyone, from improved communication systems to more efficient transportation methods. "Perhaps most significantly," Valana said, her voice filled with emotion, "we've seen a change in how families treat their children with disabilities. Instead of shame and hiding, there's now pride and celebration. Children who would have been abandoned are now being raised with love and support." This transformation had touched Jake deeply. He had visited families across the empire, seeing parents who had learned to celebrate their children's differences rather than mourn their limitations. Support groups had formed, advocacy organizations had emerged, and a whole new culture of acceptance was taking root. "The cultural festivals have been particularly successful," reported Minister Kalesh, who oversaw artistic programs. "The adaptive arts movement has created entirely new forms of expression. Dance performances that include chairs and mobility, devices, visual art created by artists with visual impairments, music composed by those with hearing differences. We're discovering that what we once saw as limitations actually opened doors to beauty we never knew existed." Jake thought about the festival he had attended the previous week, where Valana had performed a stunning dance piece that incorporated her mobility device as part of the choreography. The audience had been moved to tears by the grace and power of her performance. She had become not just a symbol of inclusion, but a celebrated artist in her own right. "The alliance with the human territories has been strengthened beyond anything we originally negotiated," Zarathul observed. "Our shared commitment to inclusion has created bonds that go far deeper than trade agreements or military treaties." Indeed, the relationship between the Kethmori Empire and humanity had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic politics. They were no longer just allies, but partners in a grand experiment of building truly inclusive societies. Exchange programs brought human students to study in Kethmori universities, while Kethmori citizens learned about Earth's approaches to accessibility and inclusion. Other species have begun requesting assistance in developing their own inclusion programs, Jake noted. The Zelani Confederation wants to implement adaptive education systems. The Myrthan Republic is interested in accessibility technologies. What started as a change within the Kethmori Empire is becoming a galactic movement. Zarathul stood and walked to the great window that overlooked her capital city. The view had changed dramatically over the past months. Buildings now featured accessibility modifications, public spaces included adaptive equipment, and the streets bustled with citizens of all abilities participating fully in society. Most importantly, she could see her people smiling more, interacting more freely, and working together in ways that had been impossible under the old system. 6 months ago, the Empress said to the assembly, I believe that strength came from hiding weakness, that perfection was achieved by excluding imperfection. I believe that my daughter was a burden to be hidden rather than a treasure to be celebrated. She turned back to face the council, her crystalline features reflecting the light from the chamber's new adaptive lighting system. I was wrong about everything. True strength comes from embracing everyone. True perfection includes all variations of life. And my daughter has proven to be not a burden but one of the greatest gifts our empire has ever received. Villano smiled at her mother, her confidence and joy a stark contrast to the frightened, hidden princess she had been just months before. The work is far from finished, she said. We still have institutions to reform, attitudes to change, and barriers to remove. But we've proven that change is possible, that societies can evolve, and that everyone truly does have something valuable to contribute. Jake stood and raised his glass in a toast that had become traditional.